Many. I managed to get Rafah early morning. I spent that day at the street. Who remained of medical staff? Actually, all of them are arrested. They arrested all the medical team who remained at Nasser Hospital. We don't know the fate of my colleagues. Actually, from my department, they took one GB doctor, my assistant, Dr. Mahmoud. They took two nurses from my department, Rami and Muhammad. They took, I think, around 100 of medical staff already have been arrested by IDF. Now I'm at Rafah. I came here to EGH hospital in Rafah to say hello to my friends, actually. And this is the situation here. I built a tent, by the way, for my family. I went to the MSF shelter with my wife and my children. I'll keep you updated. Thank you.
That was Dr. Ahmed Maghrabi speaking Sunday from Rafah. He was forced to leave Al Nasser Hospital with the Israeli raid. He was the head of plastic surgery there. Last week, Democracy Now! Was able to receive updates from one of the last remaining surgeons inside Al Nasser Hospital, Dr. Khaled Al-Ser. This is the last video Dr. Al-Ser posted on his Instagram page from Friday evening.
This ICU patients have just died because they cut all the electricity at Nasser Medical Hospital. And another 6 patients is awaiting the same fate.
We are looking at a dead patient. During the days-long Israeli raid on Al Nasser Hospital this weekend, people were unable to reach Dr. Khaled Al-Ser, raising concerns he had possibly been abducted. This morning, Democracy Now! Was able to reach Dr. Khaled Al-Ser's cousin, Dr. Usaid Al-Ser. He's a Palestinian refugee from Gaza and a surgeon resident in training in Lubbock, Texas. We asked him if he's heard anything from his cousin at Al Nasser. This is what he shared with us.
Hi, this is Dr. Al-Ser. This is just an update about Dr. Khaled Al-Ser, who's my cousin. So yesterday he texted in our group chat where we have a telemedicine group to discuss trauma cases, and he reported that he is relatively okay, and he was not abducted, which is amazing. But it sounds like some of his colleagues were abducted, and some of the patients as well. But he is still in Nasser Hospital taking care of the remaining patients in the orthopedic and burn units.
That is Dr. Usaid Al-Ser, cousin of Dr. Khaled Al-Ser, still in Gaza. For more, we're joined in Chicago by Dr. Thaher Ahmoud, an emergency room physician who spent 3 weeks in Gaza volunteering at Al Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. He's a board member for Med Global, which has an office in Gaza and is working with the World Health Organization. Dr. Ahmed just returned to Chicago, where he's the global health director of his hospital and also an assistant professor of emergency medicine at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Thanks for joining us again, Dr. Ahmoud. If you can give us the latest on what took place, the hospital where you volunteered, Al Nasser Hospital, one of the largest in southern Gaza, the World Health Organization has called it now non-functional. The Israeli raid took place this weekend. Explain what you understand is taking place.
Well, this all really started just about a month ago while I was there in Khan Yunis at Nasser Hospital. The Israeli tanks and the military was inching closer and closer to the hospital and had made its way around the complex of the hospital. And many of the staff then had told me that this was going to unfold. What we're seeing happening now over the course of a week, they had predicted this is exactly what would happen. And they knew that because many of them had been displaced from other hospitals throughout the Gaza Strip. Many of them had come from Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. Many of them had come from Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. And so they
An
had
invader.
predicted that what would happen is people
Of a
would
fake
be
religion.
forced to be displaced
All
from
because
around
of
the
a fake
compound where
religion.
thousands of people were sheltering, that there would be
shit.
very intense bombing and shelling. There would be demands for them to leave. There would be threats, just like we
See
saw
what they
happen
allow?
all of
See what
last
religion
week.
allow?
And then finally, there would be an assault
You
on
see
the
what
hospital,
religion
a raid with troops, and many people would be abducted. And they even said
Religion is
what would
what
happen
caused
during the
black people to be
abduction. They said
enslaved
Israeli
too.
troops would
On a
clear the
slavery
hospital
condition,
floor
that's
by
it.
floor,
Think it's just
and whoever they
the
felt like
devils of
detaining and
Jesus
abducting,
Christ.
they would take them, and
Every
they would
time
be
Jesus
gone
Christ
anywhere
show up
from
on
2
African
weeks
shore,
to
niggas end
4
up
weeks, and they'd be
in
subjected
slavery.
to humiliation
And they
and
still don't
torture.
get it.
And they predicted that
Up
many
to this
people
day.
would unnecessarily die, and that's exactly
Still
what we
don't get
heard.
it.
I was also able to get an update from
Every
Dr.
time
Khalid, the
religious
trauma
these
surgeon that you
people
just
show up on our
mentioned,
shores.
and one of the things that he said in that
Africans
message
end up in
was
slavery.
that it was 3 days of hell
they
for
still don't
patients
get it.
and for
Okay.
doctors and for staff. He had mentioned that they were essentially asking many of the staff and the patients to keep moving
Because
from
they're
building
like
to building within the
peaceful
medical
people should
complex.
put
He
we didn't
mentioned
have
that
no Jesus
they had
Christ.
to move
That wasn't in
65
our shit.
patients that were bedbound using one elevator to the smallest and oldest building in the compound. And it was him
They brought that
and
to
20
us.
of the medical staff members that remained while there were
Gave them
200
something.
patients.
They came up with
And the other thing is, yes, electricity was cut off and ICU patients died, but I just kind of want to give the details of how that happens. When you cut off electricity, especially for ICU patients, many of whom are dependent on ventilators to breathe, once you cut off that electricity, they suffocate to death and they die. And that's what happens to them. And we know 2 of the patients in the ICU died that way. We also know from Dr. Khalid and many of the other physicians and staff members that are there that a missile struck one of the patient wards in the hospital and it instantly killed the person, injuring 6 others. And just like the World Health Organization mentioned that this hospital is not functioning, but there's pandemonium. It's total chaos. These patients, many of whom are either amputees or they have been injured or they're even just sick from some sort of bacterial infection. They're not able to move around and there is no staff to check on them or to give them the antibiotics that they need or to deliver the care. And so there is a true level of uncertainty taking place
True
here.
level
They
of
are all
evil.
at risk. I believe you mentioned how the WHO said that
Talking
there are
about
20 who need urgent referral. If
they
that doesn't
God's
happen in the
chosen
next
people.
2 to 3 days,
Yeah,
those
God
people
told them to
will die.
slaughter
They
and
will
genocide
be
them
killed in
too.
this process. And
I
I
wonder
think
which
what
God
we're
told them
seeing is
that
an assault overall on the healthcare system. It's already devastated, and you're talking about the largest hospital in southern Gaza, one of 2 referral hospitals that remain in all of the Gaza Strip, and one that was able to handle multiple operating room cases at one time. And so it's not operable, it's not functioning, and that is absolutely devastating. It's a public health nightmare, and it's horrifying to think what will happen to all of the people who need care in the Gaza Strip for an already overwhelmed system.
Have you heard anything, Dr. Ahmoud?
Didn't they do this to the African people too?
Al-Hout, the director of the Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis. We're seeing tweets that he was abducted by
The
the
original
Israeli
people
military.
of the land? Then they do it to the
I know
Africans,
him. I mean,
the
he
original
is
people
the
of
director
Egypt,
there.
which
He
they
was somebody
occupying
that
right now.
said that he was
Talking
going to
about
remain
a-
in the hospital as
talking
long
about
as there were
Israel.
patients there, even back when I was there, and it was clear that there was an imminent siege that was going to take place. And the last that I saw was a picture of him speaking to an Israeli soldier. Nobody has heard from him since. Nobody
show you
knows
that
what
on
has
the map.
happened to him. And
show you that
again,
on the map.
this is very much part and parcel for what we've seen happen to healthcare workers and the healthcare system in Gaza. We know that the director of Shifa Hospital suffered a similar fate in terms of being abducted and detained and being subjected to torture and humiliation.
Can you talk about the reports of the patients who died? We have reports of 8 patients who died. We see Dr. Asser, who filed these video reports standing next to a dead patient. He said he died after the electricity was cut off.
Yeah, I mean, this is
Didn't
the
it do the
problem
same
is
thing
when
to-
we are talking
But
about
wait a minute, didn't it do the
hospital
same thing
system,
over
we're
here
talking
during
about,
COVID?
the largest hospital, you're going to have very sick patients because the assumption is that
COVID
this
too?
hospital has the capabilities to be able to take care of those patients. And
They're
Nasser
pulling the
Hospital,
plug.
if it's fully
They're pulling
functional,
the plug.
is a phenomenal hospital with incredible physicians. Dr. Khalid being one of those physicians. We're
very
talking about
familiar
probably
to
the
me.
best and brightest clinicians in all of the world, and I can I can say that I've witnessed that
Didn't
firsthand.
Roma
When
Ras
you are not able to
get kicked
deliver
out
any
of
sort of
being a governor
supplies
because
or
of something
care
to
to this
do with that
hospital,
same
when the
situation
electricity
there,
cuts off
buddy?
and these people are on ventilators, or they can't get an X-ray or a
The
CT
world needs to
scan, or you
stand up
can't
against
work a
this
pump
bull.
that can
That's what
deliver
you need to do.
antibiotics or fluid into an IV, we're putting them at risk. We're putting them at danger. But I think people need to also recognize we're causing an incredible amount of suffering to take place. You know, the ICU is on the 4th floor of the hospital at Nasser, as well as the operating rooms. They're all on the 4th floor. Dr. Khalid shared with us around 7 days ago that a operating room nurse was walking through the hallway and was hit by a sniper. And so he became one of the patients at Nasser Hospital. He needed to have emergency surgery. He needed to have a two-place because his lung had collapsed from the sniper bullet that hit him. And he was walking on the 4th floor. I mean, that's where all of us stayed. That's where we slept when we were working at Nasser Hospital. And any of these patients, if you were to walk through any of the floors at Nasser Hospital, you'll see they're lined up all next to each other. There is no space. Before any sort of siege, Nasser Hospital was 300% over capacity. There were over 1,000 patients there, and there was not a single inch or space that you could walk without running into a patient. And so it's exceptionally dangerous to leave these patients unattended without medical staff being able to deliver the care that they need. It's very dangerous when you're not able to deliver supplies to restock the hospital. And then when you cut off electricity and then raid the hospital and you hear reports of gunfire in the hospital like we did take place at Nasser Hospital, it becomes a bloodbath. It's a massacre. And that's something that I
Right,
think
because
every
what are
single
they- what is
healthcare
their
provider
defense?
in the world should stand
Yeah,
up
because
against.
like
I mean,
the
that's not
Palestinian
something
people
that's
have a defense.
acceptable.
What
Hospitals
defense
cannot become
do
targets.
they have?
There has to be a different way to
Blaming
accomplish
Hamas
whatever
as the
military
attacker
objective there
on
is.
your
These
big
hospitals
country
are
invasion,
lifelines regardless of what city
calling
they're
it
in, but
Israel,
especially in
and saying
Gaza,
that
and
Hamas
especially in
shot
Khan
the
Yunis. A
weapon
place
that
like
started this
Nasser
war
is the last
is a
place,
lie.
is literally the last place of
Whoever
refuge,
shot that
not just
weapon
for
knew exactly
patients
what
and
they were
doctors,
doing
but for the many
based
internally
on
displaced people who thought that it
setting
would be
this
safe
war
there.
and the
so
genocide
when
on
we're
these
talking
people.
about electricity being cut off, or
So
maybe
how
there's
do we know
shrapnel
that
flying through the window, or any of these workers not being able
Netanyahu
to leave,
didn't have
it's
that
not
done
just an
in
inconvenience.
order to
It's
do
not
this?
just another incident. It is
Okay?
horrifying,
Because
and
they
it
know for one the
becomes a
Palestinian people ain't got
bloodbath.
no damn
It's very, very
military
concerning of what's
ships.
happened at Nasser
They
Hospital,
ain't got no
but it
F-14s.
fits with what
And they ain't
we've
got none of
seen
that shit.
happen to all of the other hospitals in the Gaza Strip.
Biden
And it
sends
started all the
our
way in the north,
military
and it
over there with
seems
all
to be
this
heading
might
towards the south.
for people
And
who
that's
don't
something
even
that should
have
concern every single person
M16?
who wants some sort of ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, who wants hostages to be released, and who wants the
Slavery
people of Gaza
has
to get the
never ended,
desperately
have
needed aid that they deserve and are in need of right
Slavery
now.
still
The
going on.
significance of
as
Dr.
we
Ahmed
can see.
Maghrabi leaving Nasser, who has stayed there all
better
this
we could
time,
look
the
up.
head of plastic surgery, but feeling at this point of the raid to protect his family, he had to go south to Rafah.
Yeah, I mean that's the tragedy in all of this. This is what we're forcing healthcare workers to do. This is what is happening to the healthcare system. I mean, as a result of that, people will die. People will suffer.
So
And
where's
we
that
cannot
World Health
expect these healthcare
Organization?
workers to just be
I thought the
subjected
World
to this
Health
sort of
Organization is
violence. That
supposed
doesn't
to
happen
handle
anywhere
this.
else in the world.
The same
And just
one
as
that
an
was
American doctor who works
censoring
in the
people
United
words.
States, I remember when Ukraine had hospitals that were targeted, that the American Medical Association came out very strongly and appropriately saying hospitals and healthcare workers can never be targeted. For some reason,
yeah, right.
that is not happening in the Gaza Strip. We're
Right.
not hearing
They
voices
cannot be
as loud.
targeted.
We're not
Yeah,
hearing professional
right.
societies like the American Medical Association come out against that. And so that's what happens. You have
They
people
have
like
even
Dr.
killed
Ahmed, whose patients
clergy
totally depend on
out of
him.
the
But
Catholic
he's at
Church.
risk of death.
You have
can
even
be killed, and that's
assassinated
not the
clergy
overreaction.
members.
It has happened.
So,
Over 300 healthcare workers have died. Your show, your program reported on Hind, the 6-year-old who was stuck in Gaza City, who was talking for 3 hours to the dispatcher from the Palestinian Red Crescent. She was waiting for somebody to rescue her.
Netanyahu
And then when an ambulance with 2 paramedics were
beast.
trying to reach her and were given
He's
the green light
working
and coordinated with
for the
Israeli
beast,
authorities,
the
they
deep
were
state.
bombed and killed, and Hind was left
Netanyahu
to
ain't no
die.
more.
She had died, and
And
this
I've
is
always
just
been in my
another
book,
chapter in the
a
assault
deep
on the
stater.
healthcare infrastructure in the Gaza Strip.
Baphomet,
And so every
Luciferian,
way you look at this, it's an
blood-sucking,
absolute
thirsty,
tragedy,
dumb,
and people
stupid,
will suffer
twisted,
as a result of
cue
this.
ball, lead-head.
What has the American Medical
Son of a bitch.
Association said?
Nothing. I mean, nothing. And they're not the only ones. It's Most of these professional societies, especially when it comes to the healthcare professions, have been silent on the Gaza Strip.
I
And
wonder
if you try
why.
to broach this subject, it's what we're being told is that this is a very politically charged and polarizing topic. I reject that totally. That's unacceptable.
Exactly, me
it's not
as well.
political or polarizing when you're talking about children who are hungry, just like you reported early in the show. It is not political or polarizing when you're talking about being able to treat patients, people getting dialysis, making sure that somebody doesn't bleed to death. It's not political or polarizing when you're asking for antibiotics. We're just asking that hospitals not be targeted, that they not be bombed, and that doctors and nurses can provide for their patients without being worried
And
that
in
they
a
may
war,
be killed or
this
that they may be abducted
this
or
have never
arrested
had the
or
respect
whatever it
of
is.
in
They should
war.
be able to practice with that
They've
sort of
never
peace
had
of
the
mind.
respect of that
And
in
it's really
war.
unfortunate that
They have
especially here in the
always
States,
attacked
we don't have that sort of
the general
consensus. The
public.
entire
Like I
international
said, the
humanitarian
general
community
public
is in consensus. You need a ceasefire
down
now.
with
Hospitals
Hamas.
need to be protected and functioning.
Hamas
The
is
WHO
an
says they want to be able to
invasion
deliver
into
supplies to Nasser
Palestine
Hospital.
and taking
Why
over
that
rule.
sort of
It
conversation
is not
is
the
derailed in
Palestine
the United
people.
States is beyond me.
So why are
but
the
it's something
Palestinian
that's
people
no
being
longer
attacked?
acceptable.
Such
And
as
it's
you
much
did.
too late now to come out and
In,
say something. So we need even
Johannesburg,
stronger approaches now.
in
We
South
need
Africa.
efforts to deliver aid to the people of Gaza. One
Because
out of
South
6
Africans
children in the
is the
north of
first
Gaza
one
need
started
immediate
what we
nutritional
call
intervention.
the guerrilla
That just came out 2
movement.
days ago in a report by UNICEF. 1 out of
This is
6
where the Arabs
kids
learn how to do
is
guerrilla
starving.
warfare.
And we need to do something now. They need to be hospitalized so
How
they
to
can get the
protest
nutrition that they need. You
and
think
these
that that's
different
not
stuff.
something that's very
So South
controversial,
Africa has
that
been
any
very
sort of
outspoken.
organization anywhere in the world,
Because they
regardless
know
of the
this
background or ethnicity
firsthand.
or faith, should be able to call for that, should be able to say kids don't
So
need to
how is
go
that
hungry.
political when you're
I just checked. The
attacking?
American Public Health
guess the Palestinian
Association
people must
did
have
urge President Biden and
F-14s.
Congress to demand an immediate
The Palestinians must have
ceasefire in Gaza back in November, whether or not the
aircraft
American
carrier.
Medical Association
Or maybe
did,
the
which they
Palestinians
didn't.
might have
I want to thank you, Dr. Thayer Ahmed,
new age
an emergency room physician who spent 3 weeks in
I
Gaza
mention
volunteering at Al
F-14s?
Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, which
We
was
must
raided
stand up
by the
as the
Israeli
world
military this
and
weekend.
shut this down.
Dr. Ahmed is a board member for Med Global, which has an office in Gaza, is working with the World
The people
Health
must
Organization.
speak, and they must speak
Next
now.
up to Russia. More than 400 people have been detained for publicly mourning the death of Alexei Navalny, who died in an Arctic prison.